Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Equitable Sourcing webinar and salon discussion. We'll talk a little bit about what we mean by salon discussion. But while you're arriving, we invite you to check in the chat window. So your name, where you're calling in from, and just how you're doing today, just so we can all get a sense of who's joining the conversation. So first of all, let me just kind of go through a little bit of just who I am, so you know who's speaking to you today, a little bit about how we're going to structure our time together, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly to really kick us off, and then we'll hear from our panelists and that they're really going to be the focus of today's call. So Samantha Veide, I currently work for a nonprofit called Forum for the Future. We are based out of London, and our US offices are based out of New York, which is where I sit here in the US. And we are a sustainability nonprofit that really looks to use futures and system change tools to advance sustainability and bring us all to a more just and sustainable future. I've worked in coffee for 10 years, was really delighted to be part of the original work with PGE 5 years ago, and delighted to be here today to kind of discuss what's happened in the last 5 years. So that is me, and I will just be facilitating the discussion today. And just so you know, if you're not familiar with the concept of a salon, it's really meant to be a conversation. So really gently held space, if you will, a conversation to increase kind of knowledge and connection through conversation. And the phrase I've always heard is its purpose is to please or educate folks. And we're hoping to do a little bit of both today. Great, so that's me. Let me turn it over to Kimberly to do an introduction, a little bit of context setting, and then we'll hear from our panelists.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. I'm not sure you can see my slides. Can you see the slides?
We can't.
Huh. Okay. All right. Well, let me just try one more time. See if that works. Now, okay, great. So this salon wouldn't be possible without, of course, our salon guests. So first and foremost, thanks to all the salon guests for joining. And also want to highlight the support from Roast Magazine and Baratza, and especially because that support has made possible the translation that we have today. So we're really thrilled. It's great to see all of you from all over the world, really. Mbula maybe is one of the furthest flown, but those of you joining from Central and South America, thrilled to be able to share this work and this conversation with also people that are not English speakers. So thanks to Roast and Baratza for that support. Hopefully you have your translation already set, and if you do want to ask questions towards the end, please wear a headset. It helps the translator with her work. So Sam, are we going to do a round of introductions first, or?
Sure, yeah, you want to do that? Let's go ahead and kick off introductions then. And for efficiency, let's just go maybe in order on the screen, yeah? So from left to right. So Kimberly, do you?
Great. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly Easson. I am the founder and the CEO of the Partnership for Gender Equity.
Good morning, afternoon, evening. My name is Konrad Brits. I'm the CEO and founder of Falcon Coffees, calling in from Lewis in the UK.
Mbula?
Shaun, Puklavetz, the coffee sourcing and relationship manager for Blue Bottle Coffee.
And I am Mbula Musua. I am the Chief Empowerment Officer for Utake Coffee Limited, SA certified training campus, so offering coffee education, but also trading in coffee, green and roasted, active participant in gender equity issues, International Women Coffee Alliance, and others. Happy to be here.
I can go. My name is Veronica Rossi. I work in Lavazza, an Italian coffee roaster, and I work in the sustainability department.
Hello,
Hola,
everyone. Fatima.
Fatima.
hola, Fátima Ismael, trabajo para la Unión de Cooperativas Agropecuarias SOPPEXCCA en Jinotega, Nicaragua. Muy buenos días.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Amoroso. I work on the sourcing team as one of the coffee buyers and also do the tea buying.
Great, excellent. Thanks all for improvising there. I think we went out of order a little bit, but
Yeah.
but we got it.
I followed the pictures on my screen and not on the slide. My apologies, Mbula. I jumped in front of you, and
It's all good.
Already mayhem with this group. Oh my.
All good.
Okay. Well, great. Well, welcome. And the reason why we all came together today for this conversation is really it's sort of a momentous occasion where 5 years ago, we published the first report on gender equity in the coffee sector called The Way Forward. Since then, the report has been translated into Spanish and into French. So thanks to the Inter-American Foundation and USAID Strengthening Value Chains Program in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And, you know, this report was published under the auspices of the Coffee Quality Institute, who incubated the Partnership for Gender Equity prior to us becoming our own independent not-for-profit organization in 2019. So thanks to CQI for all of their support over those 5 years. And so we thought this would be a fantastic moment to celebrate, hey, Alex, to celebrate and to just take a moment and to reflect. What have we accomplished? What kind of progress have we made? What have we learned? What kinds of new perspectives do we have? But maybe even more importantly is now knowing what we know, what are the things that we can actually do together? How can we strengthen collaboration and move forward to generate a much more significant impact across the coffee sector? As we know, COVID has upended our worlds everywhere, and it makes this an even more poignant time to have this conversation, because there's an incredible risk, and it is happening, a backsliding with the progress made on women's empowerment and gender equity, not just in coffee, but everywhere that we look. You can read the data, and it is apparent that women's voices are not being heard. There is more gender-based violence, and generally speaking, women are bearing a significant brunt of the COVID crisis, as they do with most other crises. So we want to make sure that we in the coffee sector can really limit the backsliding on that progress. So that's what brings us here today. And, you know, I want to take just a moment to acknowledge two people, well, actually three people in particular, but I do want to take my hat off, if I had one, to Konrad and to Samantha, because back in 2015, the two of them went to their companies with this concept that I shared from the Partnership for Gender Equity and the Coffee Quality Institute to say, you know, let's do some research. Let's figure out what gender equity means for the coffee sector. And they stepped up and were able to go to their companies and secure important financial investment to make the research possible. So I would say that the research wouldn't have happened, and that PGE probably wouldn't be here if it weren't for your leadership. And I also want to acknowledge Fatima Fatima Ismael Espinoza from SOPPEXCCA, joining us from Nicaragua. Many of you know her. She's been a long-time mentor and ally for me in this work, and she's truly an inspiration for her efforts at SOPPEXCCA and more broadly in terms of sustainable community development and gender equity for more than 20 years. Her work was really the seed for the founding of the International Women's Coffee Alliance many years back, and continues to be an inspiration for the work of the Partnership for Gender Equity. And as you're aware, Central America has been devastated by 2 hurricanes, not just one, but 2 hurricanes. And so there is, again, this moment for unwavering leadership and wisdom to support families across the region. And so I think those of us me in my comfortable chair in Washington, D.C., I have no idea what it is to have 600 or more families dependent looking to me for, how do we rebuild? How do we recover? What do we do? And that's the role that a woman like Fatima and many other farmer leaders play around the world in moments of crises. So I do want to invite you that if you haven't had a chance to donate to hurricane relief, that you please do. We, of course, are collecting funds that will go directly to SOPPEXCCA, and we invite you, especially if you find value in this session today, to please consider donating to this fund. So with that, welcome again, everyone. We're thrilled and very excited for this conversation, and I'm going to turn it back over to Samantha to lead us.
Great, thanks, Kimberly. And while we begin the conversation with our panelists, I want to invite everyone to add your thoughts to the chat. So either questions you have for the panelists, or please chat amongst yourselves. We do have a couple folks from PGE with us today that will be harvesting insights and questions from the chat window so that we can bring those into the conversation. So as much as possible on the webinar format, let's make this a two-way dialogue. Okay, well, let's kind of dive in. And I think that the question that I'd like to pose to all of you to kind of kick us off is, as Kimberly said, this is an incredibly poignant moment for reflection, right? We are at the decade of delivery. We started talking about at the beginning of 2020, and that decade of delivery has either been accelerated or stalled based on some of the deep cracks in our system that have been revealed this year as a result of COVID, the hurricanes in Central America, Brexit, the fires in Australia. It's been quite a year, and I do think it's an appropriate time to kind of pause and reflect. So I guess with that kind of reflective hat on, what progress do you think we have made in advancing coffee equity or advancing equity in coffee value chains in the last half decade? So what progress have we made? Let's start off on a positive note. I'm sure we can get at some things that we can do better. So who would like to, I'd like everyone in the panel to kind of share. Who would like to kick us off?
I can start, Samantha.
Perfect, thanks, Veronica.
I'll try to be brief because we are a lot of us. So what I would say is that 5 years ago, the United Nations issued the Sustainable Development Agenda. And goal number 5 is, the goal dedicated to gender equality. And I'm really, let's say, thankful to the SDG agenda because it also calls upon the business world, of which I'm part today, I'm representing, to act on sustainable development and on these kind of issues. And I'm really thankful because thanks to this scheme, many companies, and Lavazza too, decided to take gender equality as a business issue, let's call it like that, put it in the agenda of the company, and we changed a bit our perspective to sustainable development by looking at different pillars, and one of these for us has been gender equality. So for us, and for, I would say, the world that we represent as roasters and as a company, this last 5 years in the coffee sector have been really crucial to acknowledge the fact that women contribution in the coffee sector is fundamental along all the value chain, and that it's really important that companies put this kind of objective to reach gender equality and to empower women into their sustainable business strategy. And that has been for me a very good achievement. And I really hope, as you said, that this decade of delivery will be fast in delivery and people that now acknowledge that that's important will start to act and put this objective into their daily life and daily business practice. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Veronica. What does that spark for anyone else on the panel?
I can go next. Thanks, everyone. And just to follow up on what Veronica said, I think for me, seeing the SDGs roll out across the world and kind of put institutions and organizations, despite where they are located in the world, at task to ensure that they are doing the right thing, has done a lot for not only the Partnership for Gender Equity, but just for gender equity as a whole. I feel like women now, or youth, people with disabilities, other genders represented in that development goal have a voice. They can ask questions, they can demand to share a place in the table and in leadership. And in regions like Africa, that was a leap. When I think about the development of other countries and other regions and how long it took to get there, I would imagine Africa would have been very far off in terms of catching up with everyone else. But the fact that this was a global mission to get everyone at par on equity basically really just pulled up a big population of the world, and in our case, coffee producers, which is the sector we're in, and coffee stakeholders in general, who basically just read on this kind of affirmative action and got to enjoy all the gains that have come from that. One of the other things is just the growth of IWCA chapters, for example, as one of the vehicles of raising the voice on gender equity, not necessarily having a specific direction of how to do it because all these places are different, but having a tool or an institution that can support the issues of gender equity across the region. This has grown a lot in the last 5 years. I've seen baristas, girls, and boys alike, youth, participating without fear and without being worried that they will not get through because they're a woman, or because it's been cultural not to have women participate in this kind of events. And all that said, I mean, having even a World Barista Championship within the last 5 years, compete and win as a woman, was probably one of the things that might not be just her skill, which was obviously recognized, but also all the work that has happened on gender equity to put aside any prejudices on gender and basically just look at skill. So I've seen a lot of that, and obviously that has encouraged very many young people in this region, and I guess around the world, to see that they are able to thrive and do well if they choose to go a certain direction in our sector. So I think for me, that's what I would look at as growth. I also feel like the fact that gender equity is so different in different places, and we have representation in the coffee sector of people in different cultures and socializations, it has forced us as, professionals working in coffee and having to deal with gender equity to really look at context and not give a one blanket fits all kind of approach on gender equity issues for it to be successful. And I think in the beginning, it was very random. It was like, this is what we need to do for gender equity, but digging deeper into different cultures, it was possible to see different ways of doing things that would be beneficial without disrupting the harmony. So I think that's also a very big level of growth. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Mbula.
I'm happy to go. Thinking about the last 5 years and coffee supply chains in particular, I think of the sustainability movement starting really with the fair trade and the moral high ground, if you like, and then the second generation of the sustainability movement being around certifications. And it felt like there was a bit of drift where certifications were treated like the silver bullet to sustainability. And we're seeing a growing recognition that while certifications are a very effective means for brands to communicate with consumers, they're not a silver bullet. And in the more recent movement, and it's interesting, I'm pleased to see so many in Veritas people in the audience, is there's this drive for big data and to move away from a square root system of certification audits into traceability to household level. And I think the consequence of that is a much more human story. There's a real connection with people in their location. And that really, that sets the scene for a conversation that incorporates the equity piece. And it's not just about sort of the future supply of coffee, if you like. Which really leads to the second piece is there is, I think, a very healthy paradigm shift away from what felt like an unhealthy conversation where farmers have been cast as sort of helpless, impoverished people relying on the benevolence of the wealthy roaster and retail industry to fix their problems. And there is a growing realization that actually, if we're going to keep people farming coffee, and you look at the average age of coffee farmers around the world, 55 to 57, is that that coffee needs to offer both hope and dignity. It needs to offer the hope of an improvement of quality of life, if not for the farmers themselves, but at least a pathway for their children through education and healthcare and other benefits. And the dignity of being treated as an equal at the negotiating table in the value chain. So I think those two things have really, there is significant momentum in changing the culture and evolution, which allows the gender equity piece of this conversation to come into focus too. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Konrad. All right, who of our panelists would like to share next? And let's try as much as we can to kind of keep our answers punchy here so we can get into some of the other questions for conversation.
I can just quickly, speak sort of anecdotally. I feel like we've done a very good job of making it clear that this is a priority for us as either roasters or consumers. It feels much more common to me to have a producer come up and be very eager to tell me when they're trying to sell me coffee about the gender equity programs they have or the number of women they have represented in various positions within their organization than it may have been 5 years ago. So I think we've done a good job of letting people know that there are incentives to this type of work in terms of access to market, things like that. So.
Kelly or Fatima? All right, Fatima, you're on mute.
I think you have to choose that. You have to choose your interpretation, Sam, to be able to hear her.
Ahora sí, ahora sí. Sí. Buenos días a todos. Disculpen porque tenemos todavía post-huracán algunas interrupciones de internet. Agradecerles este espacio y efectivamente para nosotros desde mi punto donde estoy posicionada, ¿verdad? A la par de las mujeres productoras y de esta organización, creo que hemos avanzado. Nosotros tenemos también, ¿verdad? Procesos que han sido de años y que efectivamente a veces tenemos que llenarnos de paciencia porque tras siglos de dominación y de cultura machista ha sido todo un proceso de vida, ¿verdad? Y de energía que hemos implementado. Y yo siempre digo, nosotros las mujeres de ayer ya no somos las mismas en este momento, ¿verdad? Ya tenemos mayor voz, mayor integración, ya tenemos más votos también, ya tenemos más liderazgo en el sector cooperativo, no solo de SOPPEXCCA, sino también de Nicaragua, ¿verdad? Podemos ver nosotros que hace 10, 15 años solamente una o dos mujeres nos manifestábamos en el entorno del mundo cafetero de este país. Sin embargo, ahora ya vemos mayores mujeres posicionadas en las organizaciones cooperativas, vemos más mujeres en las estructuras de liderazgo también, que tiene que ver con los consejos de administración, que tiene que ver con una mejor calidad de vida, porque una vez que una mujer está completamente relegada e invisibilizada, desde ahí pues hay una vida indigna y hemos logrado poco a poco ir cerrando esa brecha. Sentimos que todavía tenemos años para ir construyendo mayor equidad, y uno de los aspectos más importantes es que sí, digamos, este programa de equidad y estos movimientos como la Alianza Internacional, que nació para ese vínculo entre mujeres productoras y mujeres de la industria, creo que a nivel mundial nos ha ido abriendo también, ¿verdad?, esos espacios que nos están permitiendo interactuar en función de un bienestar integral hacia las mujeres productoras. Y creo que a la par que también las mujeres productoras hemos ido tomando estas posiciones, también vemos muchas mujeres de la industria tomando liderazgo, y eso nos alienta, nos anima, y el despertar también de la conciencia de la nueva masculinidad, que tiene que ver con hombres comprometidos con nuestra causa, ¿verdad? Por la dignificación de la mujer, por ese posicionamiento correcto de las mujeres. Ahí tenemos todavía pues, ese desafío de ir abriendo más oportunidades y cerrando brechas en este camino de injusticia, de desigualdad, de empobrecimiento, y que la equidad de género, como decía nuestro amigo, de verdad es una esperanza y también es una bandera de la dignidad humana, porque cada ser humano venimos de una mujer, y eso pues creemos que tanto hombres como mujeres tenemos que abrazar esa bandera de la dignificación de las mujeres, y esa posición y ese respeto y ese trato justo también.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to echo, I believe that the gender equity movement has really come a long way, more importantly, in the last 3 years. I think 5 years ago, it was something that was being talked about. It was something that was being included in conversations at Origin. I think what we've seen more recently, we've seen more action items at Origin of people including it in part of their mandates and part of their support for the women in their community. And really echoing what Fatima just said about a lot of our partners at Origin are putting more women in positions of power and also supporting them in that movement. I also think it's really important for us to the comments that Mbula made, that within the cultures, the various cultures across the globe internationally, really understanding how we have to rely on our partners at Origin to work within those cultures and slowly break down those barriers. So I think we've seen a lot of movement at Origin and along our supply chains, and it's something that's become very common to talk about during our visits at Origin with our partners.
And if I could compliment, there certainly has been significant progress, as everyone has said. There's a much greater awareness across the board, thanks to work from different organizations across the sector, the Sustainable Development Goals, and these global frameworks that actually try to push us to be more and encourage us to be more responsible in everything that we do. We know that there's greater training in coffee farmer organizations. That is certainly thanks to work of the certification and standards agencies and development programs. There's focus on leadership training at within farmer organizations and household level trainings as well, which are making a big difference. There's more recent work in certification and standards that are trying to upgrade their approach with regards to gender, which I think is very important. And of course, sales and interest in women's coffee, whether from Café Femenino or through the IWCA chapters, that certainly is part of the solution. Konrad pointed to the work that Inveritas is doing across the board. There is more sex disaggregated data being collected and being reported on. We need to do more of that. Research is going to continue to be a foundation for this work. And as we know, achieving gender equity really is a journey. It's not like a switch that we can flip, unfortunately. And so with all of this good progress, I think what we've been missing, and maybe that's where we kind of segue into I think one of the other questions you're going to ask is, we haven't really had kind of our own framework or our own way within the coffee sector to stitch together these activities and these programs that are having an impact, but they're still siloed. And so what can we do in terms of kind of building more collaboration that would help us link arms and have a more significant impact across the sector?
Yeah, that's a great segue, Kimberly, and I want to thank everyone for kind of starting off on a positive note and sharing some of the progress that has been made in the last 5 years, because I have to say, and this is sharing maybe a little bit of my own bias, but I'm eager for more transformative change. Like, I'm just feeling like we are not making change at the pace nor scale that we need to address some of the incredible systemic challenges that we have in front of us, including gender equity, ethical supply chains in general. So I guess on that, Kimberly, since you're already off mute, if you could maybe talk a little bit about that. So what do you think is needed? So is it just linking arms? And then Konrad, after Kimberly responds, I'd love to hear a little bit more about this problem of benevolence, and maybe if you think I think there's something really interesting there, and what you think is the progress that we need to make so we can really accelerate the pace of change.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So as you were speaking, what occurred to me was back in the year 2000, right? I was on the board of the Specialty Coffee Association, and that back then we were all really motivated and really inspired about the Millennium Development Goals, right? 20 years ago, and how we were going to put the Specialty Coffee Association, in front of the UN for our achievements on being the first sustainable industry globally. And, we've done a lot of great work in sustainability, and I think maybe there was a missed opportunity of again, kind of finding those, using the frameworks, using whether the Millennium Development Goals or other frameworks that could help to act as guardrails or guideposts for our work as the sector. And so, I appreciate that Veronica brought up, the SDGs. So, how can we use, it sounds like, definitely for business, and then within Lavazza, we're using the SDGs to guide how we engage, and especially around SDG 5. I think, in the absence of these frameworks that we really rally around with our commitments and our a more collective action framework, that we do end up continuing to be siloed and not being able to measure our impact and not really being able to point to anything significant. And so, what I'm excited about is now here we are with not only what these companies are saying and these individuals in the salon are saying, but the number of organizations that have showed up to participate today. There really is like kind of like a palpable moment, there is something happening, whether it's because of COVID, because of all the work that's been done, that we have a moment to pause and step back and see, okay, how do we actually take action together? And I think that instead of, obviously we're competitors, all of these companies here, we compete, but how can we actually collaborate as well?
Great, thank you, Kimberly. I have something more on that, on collaboration, but Konrad, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Kimberly used the word silo a couple of times, which I think is really relevant. I listened to a webinar yesterday run by The Economist, just looking forward into 2021. And the host mentioned one of the benefits of the pandemic is that it's an opportunity for the world to learn how to work together to overcome what is a global problem, that no one country can solve this issue on its own, and that we're going to need to learn these lessons in the face of the climate crisis. You know, it's going to take the same kind of cooperation if we're going to overcome that problem. So that when you say, what do we need? I think understanding our position within that framework and looking through that lens is ready to say, well, if our problems exist primarily in origin with the 12.5 million smallholder farmers that produce 70% of the world's coffee in 50 of the world's poorest countries, our 12.5 million farmers are part of a subset of a much larger group of 500 million smallholder farmers that produce 70% of the world's staple food crops. And all of these farmers face exactly the same vulnerabilities and challenges in terms of access to resources, education, etc. So, you know, when we talk about these problems and we look across this group, if you then look at the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, the statistics that are online around gender is 46% of these 500 million people are women. These women have less than 1% land title, earn less than 10% of the wages. So, you know, if we, climate crisis, coffee crisis, food security crisis, are really all part of the same conversation. And so, you know, if we're not going to address the inequity of gender within, just looking at the agricultural side of coffee right now, is we're going to exclude half the people from all of our sustainability initiatives and all of our conversations. And we're therefore doomed to failure. When I look at coffee as this really wealthy industry, there is this incredible legacy opportunity, because if we can drive the gender conversation as in every part of our sustainability conversation and initiative, is we ultimately help build a blueprint to sustainable global food security. And I think that's an enormous opportunity.
Great, and welcome back, Fatima. We're having conversations now about, we've had progress in the last 5 years, but what do we need to do to accelerate progress? So I guess, please, any comments to build on Konrad or Kimberly would be great. And I guess one of the things that occurs to me is, Kimberly and Konrad, you both brought up two possible ways to kind of accelerate change, so that we can get to the pace and scale. So Kimberly, you brought up kind of the importance of using frameworks to really collaborate. I feel like we've been collaborating a lot. I just wonder, like, what this group thinks about collaboration and what makes truly transformative collaboration, just, you know, versus 6 people getting around a table. And then I guess, Konrad, something about what you said to me really resonated as well, about the importance of addressing gender, not just as a human rights issue in and of itself and a justice issue in and of itself, but it's also about 50% of the agriculture sector actually getting access to resources, training, et cetera. And if we leave that half of the population behind, we're never going to get anywhere. So I wonder if the other panelists either have anything you'd like to add about what business needs to do to accelerate the pace and scale of change, or comments on collaboration or gender as a particular kind of nexus for greasing the wheels towards faster sustainable development.
I can go if you want. I think one of the things that we were fortunate enough to, that I would say has been a more immediate demonstration of collaboration, and that's been being part of this group with the Partnership for Gender Equity. They hosted a series of workshops over the last 2 years that we were able to participate in with many other supply chain members, importers, roasters, all kind of discussing gender equity and what that looks like and how do we measure it. I think a lot of us in our sustainability roles look for indicators, or how can we measure gender equity, and the workshops that PGE hosted really helped us kind of brainstorm about it, figure out what that needs to look like. And we're seeing some results of that with some recent work that they're doing, that they're sharing with us. And I think that's just being part of a collaborative group all along the supply chain, and working and talking about it is a first step to immediate action.
Fatima, you unmuted. I didn't know if that meant you had something to add to the conversation.
Sí, yo creo que todo este programa ha ayudado mucho a la reflexión interna también desde cada uno de nosotros, ¿verdad? Cómo vamos midiendo los avances, porque efectivamente muchas veces actuamos, colaboramos, interactuamos y no medimos este tipo de avance. Y para nosotros es relevante poder definir también todo ese marco de indicadores que responsablemente podamos decir también que estamos avanzando o nos estamos deteniendo en el camino, ¿verdad? Porque a veces también somos muy ambiciosos y queremos agilizar procesos. Sin embargo, esos indicadores también deben de entender los tiempos en que se tiene que lograr alcanzar esos avances en el tema de género. Representan también, digamos, el arraigo cultural, los procesos, el acceso a tecnología, el acceso a recursos para poder avanzar en términos económicos productivos, porque hay un tema, es decir, si las mujeres no tenemos acceso a la independencia económica, nunca vamos a poder ser libres. Siempre vamos a ser dependientes de quién tiene el recurso humano, el recurso económico, ¿verdad? Entonces, efectivamente, todo lo que tiene que ver con desarrollo humano, tenemos que vincularlo también al acceso a esos recursos económicos, a esa libertad también, ¿verdad? Que las mujeres necesitamos para interactuar. Entonces, en la práctica, los indicadores implican también un tema que tiene que ver de qué manera le llegan esos recursos económicos a los productores y productoras, o de qué manera también llegan esos recursos económicos hacia la otra parte de la cadena, que es la industria, ¿verdad? Porque hay un impacto social y educativo que tiene que ver cómo accedemos a ese tipo de recursos económicos, porque no es suficiente un crédito, tenemos que evaluar la calidad de ese crédito, que si de verdad ese crédito viene a ayudar a esa familia o viene a esclavizarla, ¿verdad? Entonces, en ese aspecto también tiene que incluirse dentro de todos los indicadores de género el tema económico, el tema productivo, el tema educativo, que es esencial y fundamental también para alcanzar todos estos procesos de vida, ¿verdad? El tema de la violencia, tanto intrafamiliar como la violencia gubernamental, la violencia de todo tipo, ¿verdad? Porque no solamente ejercemos violencia desde la familia, sino también muchas veces las leyes que nos ahogan, el ultracapitalismo también que está asfixiando económicamente a la humanidad, y este tema de COVID, ¿verdad? Que ahora sentimos que nos ha puesto a todos en un mismo barco. Ricos y pobres estamos con el terror, el temor a COVID. Entonces allí el aprendizaje con COVID es que todos somos vulnerables, todos somos sensibles, ¿verdad? A este tipo de impactos. Igualmente los fenómenos naturales nos pone a veces a todos por igual, y es allí también como, digamos, muchas crisis nos están dando lecciones en función de cambiar la estrategia de vida, la estrategia de utilidades, de enriquecimiento, de qué manera nuestros márgenes de utilidad los disponemos también hacia esa cadena que interactuamos en el café. Entonces sí creemos, ¿verdad?, que se ha avanzado. Consideramos de suma importancia, ¿verdad?, todos estos indicadores y poder entonces hacer un aterrizaje hacia de qué manera continuamos del 2021 hacia la próxima década.
Yeah, thank you, Fatima. And one of the things that I want to build on there is this, you kind of referenced at the end of your response there about this moment of COVID is kind of potentially an opening for us to address some of the systemic inequalities that have always been there, might be being exacerbated by some of the tragedies that we're experiencing this year, but in many ways have always been there. They're just harder to cover up, I guess, in some way with, and have been revealed in the last year. So I would love to hear from maybe Mbula and Veronica a little bit about this moment around COVID. So do you think that this is a opportune moment to kind of build back better and make a more vibrant coffee sector? And I just want to channel one of the comments that I've heard in the chat window, Joost. I agree with you. I'm the recent publication of the Cocoa Barometer, which I've read. I haven't seen if the Coffee Barometer is out as well, but just a little bit of a trying to hold on to optimism in light of a lot of data that shows that maybe, again, we're not making quite the change that we need. And I am excited about this year being kind of a pivot point. So I guess, Mbula and Veronica, talk to us about this. Do you think that this can be a moment to kind of pause and build back better? And what might that look like?
Can I go first, Veronica? Yeah, so definitely this time has been important for reflection and for teaching us very valuable lessons, not only as individuals or as businesses or families, societies, but as a sector in general. So I'm just looking at how important it is to have robust health systems and ensure that it's across our coffee sector. I know it's not an easy thing to follow up or address as a business or as a company. But what we need to remember is there's no coffee without healthy people. And on our side, sick people cannot buy coffee. We're already seeing those effects in the trade and in reduced number of deals and contracts. And so the importance of this being as unprecedented as it is that we need to learn from obviously countries that are managing it better or sectors that are managing it better. And this is one of the things I will just mention. You know, Africa has had a number of other pandemics previously, malaria, TB, etc. And also coupled with the kind of moderate all year round weather has managed to get through the pandemic, at least until now, knock wood, just purely by grace, I would say. But that said, the importance of these systems cannot be overemphasized. It's really important for us to look into those, even in the coffee sector. So for example, the certifications that farmers or cooperatives are expected to comply with, this can be prioritized because it's important to ensure that there's sustainability in the sector. This is just one example. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but it's not to be ignored, and it should not be just trade. There should be more than just that. And how it can be done, I don't know. I leave that up to everyone attending and to institutions that would be able to structure something around that. But I think it's important for us as a sector to think about that. The other thing is interdependence. The interdependence of our sector and our world has never been more vivid as it is now, just starting with looking at COVID, vaccine development. Everyone is kind of looking at who's going to do it first and how it's going to be distributed. I wish in the coffee sector we were looking at processes and systems in that way. Support me, I will support you. There will come a time when that happens. And to me, that's a big learning. Organizations and institutions need to find ways of being part and parcel of the lives of partners or fellow stakeholders and not just dealing with the trade. We also have to rethink a lot the way we do business. We have to rethink our operations, activities, evaluate flexibilities, learn new ways of doing things, and learn outdated ways of doing things. Embrace change and realize that, you know, we're all in this together. And I think for me, not only COVID, but also the recent Black Lives Matter movement have brought that to the fore. Technology is powerful. It can be utilized as a force for good. And combined with all the learnings, I think it's something that the coffee sector can ride on. We are more networked now than we've ever been before, than 5 years ago when PGE was started, and than ever before. And so taking advantage of seeing how some of these key issues that have affected our world have been handled could kind of be scaled downwards to coffee to help us move it to the next level. And I think it needs some reaching out. It needs some allowing discomfort to get to understand how all of us can do better and how we can improve wonderful initiatives like the PGE. Thanks.
Yeah, just briefly, I agree with what Mbula was saying. What I would add is that we saw in this crisis, apart from the importance of a resilient health systems, also the how much women have been hit by this crisis, both in terms of bearing more and more the caring of the household in general, but also the loss of jobs. I live in Italy. In Italy, 70% of people who lost their jobs from the crisis of COVID were women. And if we look at a coffee sector, you know, in Italy, how much we have the culture of espresso, of bar, coffee shops. In Italy, the majority of people working in this sector are women, and they are losing their jobs. Bars are closed now here in Italy. We have been experiencing a crisis in the restaurant and hotels and cafe sectors where coffee is present very, very, very badly, and women are the core of that. So I think that this is the opportunity to build back better, as you were saying, Samantha, because we are seeing that although women have been so invisible in the last years as far as unpaid care is concerned, now we are all seeing, working from home, that the care for the household needs to be shared between families and between the members of the families. We are seeing how much it's important that both in our families work and that women have their independence in times of crisis, that our families where you know, women are holding on their shoulders the economic management of the family now because men are losing their jobs. So again, interconnection, as Mbula was saying, is key. And I think that what this crisis needs to teach us is that we are all interconnected. A small virus in wherever in the world can affect the whole economy. And we need to work together, first of all, as men and women, and then as companies, and then as countries, and then as sectors, because otherwise we will not go further. So yes, I really agree with you that these can be an opportunity to build back much better than, you know, when we started, because many invisible little crises are coming up and are coming to, you know, to evidence. And this is really the opportunity for all of us to start again. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Very inspiring, Mbula and Veronica. Does anyone want to, I saw some nods and some smiles. Does anyone from the panelists want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think for me, the interesting thing about COVID, and you were speaking of, you mentioned the benevolence, and then I never responded to that, Sam. The thing about COVID is it's felt like really highlighted a cultural problem within the sustainability movement, in that the sustainability movement has been financed by the benevolence of roasting companies and retailers, and COVID has stopped that economic engine. You know, as Veronica was saying, cafes are closed, bars are closed. And so a lot of the finance behind these projects has simply dried up, whether it's government funding or private projects. And I think that really raises a question about where sustainability lives on companies' balance sheets. You know, if we're going to address these changes, sustainability can't be simply after profit, as if you're tipping a waiter at the end of your meal, depending, you know, on your attitude in that moment. It needs to have a much more steady and sustained momentum behind it. And I think the gender equity piece for me is also about the bottom line. Is, you know, when those words are spoken, it can feel immediately polarizing, and people think it's a men against women. And so, and I know in origin it can be, well, in addressing, you know, if we're going to raise that topic, are we going to be guilty of social engineering? Are we trying to change people's cultural behaviors? And Mbula spoke about, you know, all the different cultures that need to be combined, and it feels like the common language is the language of business and the language of profit. So if we can sort of bring that through to that being the motive, you know, that our financial survival and profitability requires us to address these issues through the lens of business, then that perhaps deals with some of that polarization.
Great, thank you, Konrad, and very good memory to get back to the question about benevolence. But I think what you're getting at, and would like to kind of ask a couple folks on the call to respond to this. We are moving into our audience, if you will, or those that are on the line, the space where if you've got questions, please put them forth and I'll ask the panelists. So Konrad, and you talked a little bit about kind of rethinking how we do business a little bit, right? And using the lens of business, but maybe questioning a little bit how it's always been done. And I think I've brought up to this group, I've been really encouraged by the thought of how do we take less versus giving more, you know, this idea that we kind of work deep efficiency into our supply chains, and then at the end, we treat sustainability a little like a charity. It's what you do after the fact to potentially fix the very issues that were caused by your supply chains in the first place. And so, and I'm really encouraged by a lot of businesses thinking about that, thinking about how they fundamentally do business differently. Maybe not enough, but anyway, so a question to maybe Shaun, Kelly, and Veronica, and of course others if you want to chime in. But so what might you specifically, what have you done, or what might you specifically do to build back better? Like, what might you be able to do to kind of begin to address some of these deep systemic challenges that we have, and use your power as powerful businesses in this sector to do that? And I called all three of you out, but I guess whoever's ready to respond first can unmute.
I can go. Well, I think that first of all, we need to, I saw the question, how can a big roaster as Lavazza do things differently? First of all, what we are trying to do is to start from the inside and to do sustainability in a very integrated way, as Konrad was suggesting, not after the business, but within the business. It's really important to engage the internal stakeholder first, in my opinion. It's really important that all the people in the company, and not just me working in the very nice sustainability department where I have a lot of fun, all the others needs to be involved. All the people in finance, in procurement, in quality, in human resources, in finance, I said that. they need to be engaged, they need to know, they need to be trained, they need to understand that the sustainable development goals are not just for me and my colleagues, but are for all of them. And that's, for example, one thing we are really focusing on very much in Lavazza. We just launched a training program on sustainability for all the people of the company worldwide, working in whatever department they need to do this training. It's not optional anymore, which was something that 1 year ago was optional. Now you need to do that. So I think we need to start from that. And because people are experiencing the big challenges in their daily life, as I was saying, COVID is making social and also environmental challenges very visible to the eyes of everyone in their daily life. So it's really, for me, a good moment to push sustainability culture within the company, because just in this way, you will inspire your colleagues in the procurement department, for example, to be more sensitive to sustainability challenges in their daily work, because we need them to integrate sustainability in the business. So yeah, that's my thought. I don't want to go too far, otherwise we don't have time. So
Great.
I hope it was clear.
Veronica. Shaun or Kelly?
Yeah, I can go. I think we're kind of changing the way we look and look at and measure our supply chain. Historically, we've done a lot of work with PGE. We've done some really great work with IWCA. I know Janine's listening to the call, so hi, Janine. But we haven't had a very good way to look at our supply chain holistically. So we can say, there's a great project going on with this 100 bags of Burundi coffee that we bought, but when we go to look at the rest of the coffee that we've purchased for the year, we can really only point to percentage of certifications, things like that. So we're starting to partner with some third parties who are measuring impact in terms of social, environmental, economic sustainability a little more systematically and a little more in a way that allows us to build and hold ourselves accountable to continuous improvement strategies. So yeah, just measurement.
I think one of the things that we've seen within our sourcing team and with our supply chain partners is really collecting information and collecting data about gender initiatives at origin, and really making that a priority when we're visiting them and letting them know and creating awareness with our partners that this is something that we are interested in supporting. I think we're also looking at how do we make it in a way that's approachable, that doesn't become a threat to the cooperative or a threat to the farm that we're working with, and really making sure they understand that it's okay for us to meet you where you're at. We just want to understand where you are, and we want to honor that, and then move forward and let's talk about how we can support these gender equity initiatives you can actually include in your sustainability activities that you might already be doing. So for example, learning that some of our partners, are offering childcare so that more women can attend training workshops so that they have accessibility to those things, or learning how our partners are allowing or pushing more credit opportunities or microfinance opportunities for women in coffee. So I think it's more of a dialogue and a conversation with a partner and a friend saying, hey, just let's talk about it and figure out where you are and how we can support you to push this initiative even further within your community and within your farmers group or your cooperative.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Shaun. I do have a final question that I want to make sure we have time for, and also a close for Kimberly. And I'm watching time, want to be mindful of everyone who's on the line. But before I do that, just any responses to Kelly, Veronica, or Shaun's thoughts about kind of tangible ways that the sector or your business or your organization can build back better. Okay.
Well, I was gonna build on what Veronica, Kelly, and Shaun spoke to, and several things that have come up. And we've been talking about these shared the frameworks or ways that we can collaborate. And I think one of the things that we've been lacking is also like a shared language. How do we talk about something that sometimes seems nebulous or maybe too nuanced or potentially sensitive, or things that have happened in the past that maybe we want to unlearn, as Mbula said. So how can we create a context and a shared language for talking about gender equity, not as like this nice thing to do, but actually something that's an important business lever for our investments and for all the work that we do in sustainability. And I think that shared language also has to come from shared goals and a shared understanding. So having information at our disposal, continued research, and also making sure that we know these issues vary from place to place. So the issues in Nicaragua are different from the issues in Kenya. There are shared threads, but also making sure that we understand the different contexts where we're working. And so so I think some of the things that we've been doing with farmer organizations. Fatima mentioned some of the report, the online self-assessment, and the report that we've been working with farmer organizations to respond to, so that they have a sense of where they are and where they want to go with regards to gender equity. And that how can we take the work of what we've done with farmer organizations and really look at, larger companies like, Jost's questions for Lavazza, larger companies that are looking for these more whole of business solutions. And yes, supporting projects in different parts of the world, that's really critical. But, how can we bring these things together in a more consistent, measurable and credible approach that can work across the sector? So those are the, some of the things that we've been working on with the Partnership for Gender Equity, creating tools and frameworks that really meet companies and farmers where they are, and supports with tools and information to help along this journey towards greater gender equity.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, we've got about 1 minute left, so we're going to make this rapid fire, but I always like to close conversation. I think it's important to put a point on things. So those of you on the panelists have heard me talk a little bit about this. I've been intrigued by this idea of radical optimism, and I sent you a little bit of a summary of what it is. So it's this idea that being radically optimistic is a philosophy that argues for looking at the good in every part of life, no matter what, but based on reason and evidence. So it's not kind of the Pollyanna approach, but the idea that there is enough cynicism and realism in the world, and it is contagious, whether it's in social media. I feel it in my own brain. I'm often challenged to feel optimistic in the face of what I see as just deep systemic challenges, but that radical optimism can help balance out this insidious kind of negativity out there and actually help us move forward on some of this. So just quickly, I'd like to, do you think radical optimism has a place in coffee in the sustainability sector? Or might it distract us from the real work?
Definitely. I like that term, radical optimism. I knew both words separately, but put together it makes more sense, especially in this day and age. And just using the gender equity example, I've seen this grow, especially in a patriarchal society like the one we live in. But I would relate it to the idea that both genders, or all stakeholders in the case of the coffee sector, have to buy into the radical optimism of the subject and highlight the benefits that would be the reasons and evidence. I've seen that with men being pulled into the issues of gender equity to understand it first, and that's, I guess, where the reasons and evidence come in. If I compare it to like the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think is very similar with gender, it's important to take everything in stride. As you said, cynicism and pessimism is all over, it's all around us. But that said, we can always do better by taking some of this criticism in stride and improving our listening, not to respond, but to actually be better, having a deeper understanding of what issues there are. As Kelly said, where are you at and where can I meet you, could probably help our sector grow in unprecedented ways. But we also have to be very careful to bring others with us, because as I said earlier, we are interdependent, we need each other. And so harmony is really important in this process of dealing with some of these negative issues. But knowledge also key, having people who are empowered to understand the sector would be of great value. There's been a lot of data collection, even in gender equity subject, but has this been translated to information so that it can go the step further to do more than we're already seeing, or as Just mentioned in the question panel, are we moving too slowly compared to how everything was in the 1980s? So in the coffee sector, I really think the onus is on organizations. They must lead by example. They must support equitable operations. It's the right thing to do. It's powerful, and it sends a positive message, not only to staff or community, that they're there for the long haul to work with everyone for a better coffee community. And I also think it's important to identify what common challenges exist, and this can help a lot to move the needle from pessimist to optimist, because they're shared. These challenges are shared by big companies, they're shared by producers, and so to address them would really need them put together. Solutions kind of drafted and put together for the betterment of the sector. Expanding the advice to look for alternative options and not just look within, but also look without would help quite a bit on being optimistic. But as you said, it's not an easy thing to do, even personally. So it has to be incorporated maybe in priorities, reevaluating priorities and strategies for coffee organizations, just so that all this noise does not end up as noise and actually gets translated to meaningful change. Thanks.
Thanks, Mbula. We are almost at 5 minutes over, but how about one more reflection on the place of radical optimism in our way forward? And then Kimberly will close us out, and hopefully we will still get you done here with 5 minutes after our promised conclusion. Don't make me call on someone, panelists. Someone better unmute. Shaun.
I mean, I think a lot of us probably spend a lot of our time thinking about how, like a particular bag of seeds is going to get from one side of the world to another side of the world, and all of the things that can go wrong, and whether or not a particular product's going to sell, and we're going to end up with too much coffee. Or there's a lot of very practical thinking that we all have to do in our day-to-day logistical lives. And I think that's an important mindset to have when you're dealing with something complex, but it's very much in conflict, to building anything or to any sort of creative process. So I think, the place of radical optimism is really to look at a problem that exists and to say it can get better, so that you bother to try.
Thanks, Shaun. All right, Kimberly, bring us home.
Well, I love the framework of the radical optimism. So thanks for bringing that up, Sam. And I think the conversation over the last hour and 15 minutes has really demonstrated that there is a lot to be optimistic about. We certainly have a lot of challenges now more than ever with COVID in front of us. But there is this space to really reflect and take action now in different ways to build back better. And I think radical optimism can be at the heart of that. And, I think it's incumbent upon us, all of us, not only the fabulous salon guests and panelists that have been here today, but everyone who's participated, to, really look and see where can we take action, where can we advocate, and what opportunities exist within our unique role in the supply chain, because this is about all of us. It does take all of us. And you know, where do we want to be in five more years, or by 2030? And PGE, we're really looking at being you know, that partner, that you know, an organization that can really help to bring this energy and this enthusiasm and this radical optimism forward in a way that really does make the coffee sector work for everyone, every woman, every man, every person, every stakeholder, so that we can have a future of coffee, so I can actually continue to enjoy fabulous coffees from around the world. It's selfish in many regards, right? And it's also just the right thing to do. So we, you know, this work doesn't happen without support. It doesn't happen without investment. You know, everyone has challenging financial times. We will be actually reaching out to you to invite, especially our industry allies, into some of these frameworks that we're building, so that we can actually make it work for your business, because there's a great opportunity. There is this enthusiasm and expressed need within the sector, and we're eager to be your partner to help fulfill on that, and help you fulfill your visions for greater gender equity and greater equity for all. So thanks to everyone. Thank you, Samantha, for facilitating this session, and thanks to all of you, Kelly, Shaun, Mbula, Veronica, Konrad, Fatima, for joining us. And please do, if you can, support the Hurricane Relief Fund, whether it be ours for SOPPEXCCA or the others that are out there. The communities really do need this support. And we'll be in touch. You're on our mailing list, so we will reach out to you after the salon as well with some ideas for how to keep engaged with this work. So thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. Take good care.
Thanks, everyone.